Hi everyone. In this video, we are talking about Chapter 1 of Understanding Environmental Health. And so this is a really short chapter. It just kind of introduces what environmental health is and why um, it's important. And so environmental health is people and the environment. You can't look at one or the other when it comes to this environmental health because each play a role. We as humans play a role in affecting our environment, and our environment plays a role in how that affects us and specifically our health. Um, and there are other things that are involved with that as well that must be considered. And so, really, when it comes to it, when you start looking at environmental health from almost a public health perspective, um, we're looking for the hazards to human health are the main things people are looking at, not necessarily um, maybe how those effects are. Like when you think about an environmentalist, they do look at these types of things, but we're really concerned about what is that hazard to the human health as it relates, and to some extent everything can, but that's what makes this kind of an interesting way to look at things, is through that health perspective. Because one of those, when we're looking at those things, you can be looking at chemicals, you can be looking at the physical environment, biological hazards even, and how those interact with things like our genetics and even our social and behaviors, and those stressors related to it. And so there's a lot of interconnectedness that comes through environmental health, and it makes it actually something really complex to be evaluated, because a small change in one piece can lead to big changes at other places. And so sometimes it's really hard for us to nail down exactly a cause and effect more than association. And so it's more than just pollution that is involved with environmental health. And you'll kind of see that as we go throughout this semester. So this kind of just shows you the scope of environmental health is really large. And just kind of what we talked about, it's focusing a lot on these chemical, biological, physical hazards and how they affect our genetic traits, but those genetic traits can also affect some of these. And then again, those social and behavioral hazards that we have, again, being affected here and vice versa. And so there's a lot in this chapter, even though it's really short and just kind of introducing you to what it is. And so again, this kind of just continues to go over the fact that it's all a big interaction that's really complicated, and we're trying to break it down to keep healthy, but also keep the environment healthy, because in turn it keeps us healthy. And so we just have to kind of keep that in mind and realize that things don't just simply disappear. Everything has to go somewhere, be broken down in some way, and the effect that has as you move down the line is important, and sometimes is what's needed to be traced back as you go through. There is, if you look back at an old environmental health kind of theory, what it was looking at was the fact that anything that was maybe negative, anything that was harmful, if you put it in a big enough space and diluted it, it would no longer be harmful. So think about a lot of smoke in your house. Most people will typically open up windows and doors trying to get that to leave, because you're allowing more air into that smoke to occupy a bigger space, be in more air. And when it's diluted enough, we no longer see those effects, but those do carry over and carry down to water sources or into soil and can eventually come back. And so not only is environmental health looking at how do you deal with something that's already there, but also what are those long-term effects, short-term, and how do we prevent those and keep everyone healthy from all perspectives. And it's not simply just diluting things, adding more, trying to make it somewhat disappear from our eyes, because it truly never will. It will transform and be transported, but it doesn't just simply disappear. And with this, there is often a lack of foresight in when adopting new products and technologies on the effects it can have on this environmental health and our health. And so we want to keep that in mind. And so this is sometimes why it's hard for some people oppose things early on, because people say, well, a new product hasn't been shown to do something. Well, that may be very valid, but we want to do our research and make sure it's not going to, instead of this anecdotal evidence that maybe something doesn't have an effect. We've learned a lot of things over the years that we thought were safe that are no longer, as we learn how they continue downstream as it relates to our health. And definitely global disparities make a difference here. More developed places tend to not have as big of issues. They deal with these things. They have more rules and regulations to help prevent people from getting sick because of the environment and things released in it. But at the same time, the lifestyles can lead to the change of environmental health in other less developed countries, because sometimes contaminating processes are just moved somewhere where they're allowed to happen, where they're not allowed in a Western society. So that kind of concludes that. So if you guys have any questions, please email me. But that's kind of chapter 1 of our public health textbook.